Guys, welcome to Venture with Joe and Cody. My name is Joe. I'm here with my buddy Cody. Cody, how are you, man?
I'm doing pretty good. How about you?
Good, good. I am excited to talk to our guest today, a friend of mine and also founder of Foresight Security Company. They're Northwest-based national security consultancy. They do all sorts of stuff with colleges, university, houses of worship, small businesses. They offer all sorts of things and services. Bryan, you have a resume that's too long to give an intro into, so we're just gonna get started into it. It's fascinating on how you got started. I think this interview is going to be helpful for a lot of people that not only are getting into the entrepreneurship and the new business side of things, because you went from being a cop to this, but also just to kind of give them advice on kind of what went wrong, what went right, what things that you found succeeded, what things that you found were terrible as an idea to when you start a business.
6 years in, man, I'm still finding those things. So
yeah,
you never know.
for sure. But it's just going to give some good insight to people. I'm excited to talk to you about it. So if you just kind of want to start us off, what is Foresight in general? Like, what's the company? What do you do? What do you provide?
Sure. So Foresight is really primarily set up to be a prevention consultancy, I think is the easiest way to say that. But we do that through kind of holistic security solutions. That's kind of our tagline. So it can sound a little weird, but what we don't offer, I think, is easy to understand. We don't offer uniform security services, and we don't offer integration. We don't put in cameras. We don't put in access control systems, though we do guide the building of those systems. So Foresight kind of started out of this understanding that, we've all seen all the terrible things that happen in the world with regard to targeted violence. And I've been very fortunate to be a threat assessment professional engaged in behavioral threat assessment since 2003. And in realizing that kind of career path, it changed, every decision I made in my career from the time I first found this discipline. And so in 2018, I was running executive protection for the Oregon Supreme Court and the Chief Justice. Joe, this is how you and I met, right? You were working at the time for OSP on the governor's detail, and we had a lot of kind of cohesion around some of the events we would go to together and that stuff.
Yep.
And so, I'm doing that work. I built the threat management program for the Oregon Judicial Department. So, there's 1,500 employees statewide using the system that I developed and trained them on. And what I started to recognize, though, is that it's great, right? The government has this stuff. The large companies of the world have this stuff. But there's a small to medium-sized world out there of houses of worship and nonprofits and family offices and this stuff that they find it very difficult to try and navigate. And overarchingly, security companies get it wrong. Security companies, at last count, I think in the state of Oregon, there are something like 500 licensed security guard companies, which is it's crazy town, right? And so understanding that by and large, they get a phone call, hey, we need a guy, and they send a guy. They go, hey, we've got, we're terminating someone scary and we need somebody here for 2 weeks. Why 2 weeks? What do we know about that person? Anything? And so there's no dive into the how we prevent. And so I, realizing that need, having an amazingly supportive wife with great healthcare benefits, 2 days after my 42nd birthday, I walked into my boss's office and I quit my job.
Nice.
I was a PERS employee for 18 years, and I had PERS write me a check so that I could fund starting this thing and keep helping out making mortgage payments.
That's great. Well, that
may
may not be great, but it's like...
I mean, look, the doc says it's stress. I'm not actually dying of heart attacks, so that's positive.
Well, it's cool that you said go ahead. But the cool thing that I wanted to highlight, though, and a lot of people didn't know, and I think what we learned when we were in the more threat assessment realm of police work is I think the traditional thought of I need a cop to do X, arrest, take care of this issue right away. And I think what we did and what your company kind of focuses on, and correct me if I'm wrong, is more of that kind of almost like an outside the box thinking of law enforcement. It isn't a one size fits all for every person. Sometimes they need counseling, sometimes they need this, sometimes,
Right.
but you're addressing it, but in different ways that actually work. versus, like you said, they hire you. We need you to sit here for 2 weeks until we think the threat is gone.
Right.
And what you guys did and what we did in the law enforcement world, and I think what you're doing now with this company is saying, well, let's take a step back, look at this, and see how do we prevent it, and then how do we manage it, basically.
Sure.
Is that correct, or is that way off?
No, it's exactly right. The assessment is just the very initial part of this process. Like, is the guy dangerous? Yeah, seems dangerous. Okay. What's the management strategy? How do we get into that? What are the things that this person needs? What are they seeing in their lives? What are they dealing with? What's the situation, right? We don't assess people. We assess situations people find themselves in, because we can affect those things, right? We can offer soft landing packages. We can say goodbye gracefully, even if we have to terminate people and stuff like that. But I will tell you that that's the what of Foresight. The why of Foresight, I think, is even more important. And if you're going to start a company, regardless of what that company is, you got to find your why. We've all heard Simon Sinek say, start with why. And it took me a while to start with why. I didn't start with why. I knew that having a couple of kids in elementary schools doing lockdown drills, these are things I cannot abide, and I want to affect that thing. I don't think I knew until about 2 years in what my real why was. I used to be on the board of this organization called the Association of Threat Assessment Professionals. And a few years ago, we were doing some strategic planning. And in that strategic planning, they brought a woman in who's a consultant that helps organizations come up with their mission, vision, and values. And she said, your mission should be the headline of the newspaper the day you go out of business. Something has been achieved that has caused you to go out of business. And so that group is a group of people who do this work, and it spans all number of HR professionals, government agencies, Secret Service, like all of these people, corporate security, all of those people are a part of this. And so their mission statement is, together, we end violence. We want to work ourselves out of this job. We want to not have to do this work. Let's do that thing. Let's stop mass shootings in schools. So I sat down with my strategic leadership team, and backing up a little bit, I was by myself until about November of 2020. Hired my first employee. We're at 20 people now.
Wow.
We're at an office in Los Angeles. We have global operations. Our clients travel all over the world. We have relationships everywhere. We do this. We're speaking internationally. So what we're doing is working. People are seeing the value in the culture we're building at our company and why that culture equates to these clients. And that's the why. Our mission statement is our communities free from violence. We want to achieve this. We want to be out of work. That's our vision statement, right? It's mission, vision, values, but that's our vision. Our mission is to provide physical and psychological safety to our clients and to our communities. It's one thing to be physically safe. It's another thing to feel safe, right? Our value system is the tactics that get us, that allow us to do our mission and hopefully allow us to complete our vision. And the number one value that we have at our company is better care for people. You've worked in threat assessment before, so I don't really need to tell you this, but most people are not on the pathway to violence, right? So for those watching that don't understand what I'm talking about, there is a real pathway. People have a grievance. Then they start to fantasize and ideate about what it would look like to solve their problem with violence. Then they move into a stage of planning and preparation. And then sometimes, rare, but sometimes they get to implementation. And that's when we see these horrific acts of violence, right? Concert shootings, mall shootings, movie theater shootings, bombings, people running people over with trucks in certain places of the world. All of those people share this pathway. All of those people do a process. No one snaps, ever. I don't care how many times somebody on TV was smart and said it. They're saying it for two reasons. It makes us feel better. Well, then that couldn't happen to me or anybody I know. And they're limiting liability. Because if they say, well, yeah, we missed this, we saw it coming, like, it's going to cost them some money.
Mm-hmm.
So understanding that that's the case, there are a lot of people that are going to deal with stressful situations. There's a lot of people moving up and down this pathway, very few of which will get to implementation, but every one of them is dealing with an issue. And so our job is to not get so myopic on the real scary cases, which certainly need our attention, but it's to pay attention to the cases where we can step in and make a small difference in someone's life and just set them up for success. I get choky about it. I get emotional about it. I am more passionate about this than anything in the world except for my wife and kids. And I know it's how we change the world. But it's up to all of us to recognize when someone is different than how they have appeared to us for months. We need to be able to say, hey, are you okay? Anything happening? What can we do for you? And what an honor it is to be able to do that work. You know, it's great.
I'm fired up. You got room for another employee?
I know. I was like, I'm getting teary-eyed. I need to take a step back here.
Nah, people like it when you get emotional, Joe.
No, it's great, and that's great news. I think like what came up in my head and what we've dealt with, dealt with in the past, and what you probably deal with now is the mentality. I guess I wanted to talk about kind of how you overcame some of the obstacles that you have, and one that sticks out in my head with these obstacles is you're dealing with something that's non-tangible in the sense that you are preventing something. So when you work with companies, how do you get to overcome those things? Because companies, this costs money, this costs time, this costs resources, and a lot of these places, especially places of worship, nonprofits, those sort of things, are like always hesitant to do this prevention. No one sees what the future cost could be if something happened. But how do you deal with those objections or things in your way of companies saying, like what you're saying, but we don't have any issues, because
Right.
I think that's what you deal with in threat assessment is you have to be 100%, and no one talks about it ever. Like they only talk about it when you failed, if that makes any sense.
No, that's great. Yes. And it's exactly right. And the idea that what we are doing is quantifiable. It's a very hard thing to quantify.
Yep.
We can show you the man hours. We can show you the amount of work that goes into it. We can show you the partnerships in law enforcement. We can talk about all those things. But if the bad thing doesn't happen, is the bad thing not happening because it never was?
Yeah.
Or is it not happening because a situation is being managed? And that is not something that is 100% quantifiable.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to give you a couple of examples of cases that we've worked locally that are kind of the everyday case. They're people who show up in life. We work with a church locally that was having some issues 17, 18, kind of as I was starting my company, and they were very interested in what it looked like to build out a security program, right? And I do that, my little hands, my little quotation marks, because program means something different to everybody.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But what a program is comprehensive and has fidelity. So it should grow, it should ebb and flow, and it should long last. The only way to do that is, real buy-in, stakeholder, acceptance and resource and all of that stuff. This is where we get to how we show the value of the program. So one Sunday, a gentleman shows up at this church and he's acting really weird. He's got some furtive movements. He's uncomfortable. He's sitting, he's standing, he's dressed differently. He maybe a little smelly, and his affect is off. And people are concerned, right? This is not something they see every Sunday in their church. And the church accepts these people. They're supposed to be able to gravitate and worship and engage their faith.
For sure.
And it's really freaking some people out. And so none of the pastoral staff on this Sunday sees this guy. But they start getting reports from people. Hey, did you see the weird guy? Blah, 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 whatever the reports look like. And we had built a team. We don't call it threat assessment in churches because that's scary. We call it, right. We call it
Support staff.
special resource teams, the SRT,
That's what we
because
have at
that's
our
what they're
church
doing,
too. Yeah.
right? They're being creative, and then they're finding resources to put in people's lives, which is what churches do. So we're at this team meeting, and this goes to the thing earlier, like you said, about the being able to be creative as well. And so how that church would have handled this is not terribly dissimilar, but we talked about it as a group, a multidisciplinary group, which is super important. Not one person has all the information, so you want different perspectives. And they said, okay, well, this is what happened. And I said, okay, did anybody say hi to him? No, we missed him. Okay, well, this Sunday, let's walk up to him. Let's shake his hand. When you shake his hand, you're going to put your other hand on his arm. You're going to feel what his body does. You're going to do it warmly, but does he tense? Does he soften? How does he engage in the conversation? And that affect is going to tell us something about how he responds, how he shows up. So one of the pastors says, I'll do that. And the next Sunday, he walks up to him. Hey, I'm so-and-so, puts his hand on his arm, and the guy kind of relaxes, leans into the conversation. And on that next Monday at the special resource team meeting, we ask about how it went. And he says, yeah, you'll never believe it, but the guy is suffering from autism. He's had autism his whole life. And what he was mentioning is that he loves the worship music, but the frequencies really affect his hearing, and it really bugs him. So he can't sit still, but he wants so badly to be there. He kind of tries to force it. And I said, all right, great. Well, what did you do? And he says, well, I said, you know what? We've got this room where the mothers go. Maybe you can be in there and you can watch it and hear, right? And I was like, that's a positive, quick thinking move. And also, I don't know if crying babies and screaming babies maybe long term,
similar effect,
same frequencies, But so I said, anybody here in their budget have an extra $100? And they were like, the same pastor was like, yeah, I got $100. Why don't you go to Best Buy and get him some in-ear noise canceling headphones? Right? Mm-hmm. And they were like, that's a great idea. But this is that creative. Like, you can just do that.
Yeah.
You can just be creative and help solve this problem. The next Sunday, I'm going to get choky again. The next Sunday, this guy shows up. Pastor walks up to him. He says, hey, I got these for you. We heard you. We want to help. We want you here. We're so glad you came. And this guy breaks down. He's like, I have been pushed from church to church to church because I know that my affect freaks people out. And so asked me not to come back. You're the first place that heard me and then did something about it. That guy was never going to be on the pathway to violence. That guy was never going to show up and shoot a bunch of people at a church. But what an opportunity to step into his life, think outside the box, be creative, and solve a problem that then allowed him full access to his faith, membership at a church, peer groups, all of this system that didn't exist for this dude previously. Yeah. And this is why I'm saying, like, when I talk to our clients about the why, because you get to care for your people better. Because when it's played out, all the things that corporations say, nobody's HR anymore, right? Everybody's like people, or global people, or people in culture. They're all changing their names to let their people know we are for you. Mm-hmm. This is how you can be for them. You can be for them long before you're having to terminate somebody because they've shown up disheveled, they're late for work, they smell of alcohol. This is where we get into their lives early. We ask about them, we care about them, we provide them resource and structure, and they're able to right themselves and stay that amazing employee, that great dad, that amazing husband. Like, that's our work. That's our job. Sometimes we don't get to do it that way, right? Sometimes somebody still gets fired. Mm-hmm. We had a client of ours where a guy was working there. He's a vet. He was posting pictures of weapons. He was doing all kinds, just as some veterans that I know might do on their social media. Mm-hmm. Not that I ever do that, but some.
Never seen it.
but so he, because of that though, they didn't know anything. They were a little worried about him, and he had alleged that he had PTSD. He had said, "I suffer from PTSD," and so as they were getting ready to terminate him, there was not a lot we were going to be able to do here. He was getting terminated. But because, again, of this association, threat assessment professionals, the longevity I've had in this industry, I thought, the guy's a vet. He says he's had PTSD. I wonder if he's being seen at the VA. So I called the VA, a good buddy of mine up there, and I said, "Hey, I need to tell you something. I know you can't tell me anything, but I need to tell you that at one of our clients, there is this guy. This is his name. And on Tuesday next week, he's going to get terminated, and it's probably going to cause some strife. I know you can't tell me anything about that, but if he was a patient of yours, would this affect his treatment plan?" And the guy says, "Absolutely. If this guy is a patient of ours, we will reach out to him before the termination and check in with him, and reach out to him right afterwards and make sure he has all the resources he needs if he's being seen by one of our clinicians." So again, can't help the fact that he's getting terminated, but we get to do this. We get to help ease that transition, even if he doesn't know we exist. And again, it is the example we use. It doesn't always work. Budgets are budgets.
Yeah.
Down cycles are down cycles. It doesn't always work. And security is oftentimes the thing that goes first, which is unfortunate, because if they're doing it right, it should be the last thing, because it is so ingrained in how they care for their people.
Yep.
But people screw up security, right? You say security and you think guards.
Yep.
You think lighting, access control, cameras. You don't think about these programmatic and cultural things that we really pride ourselves on creating. And I think it's why Foresight is such a disruptor in the industry. I know that word is thrown around all over the place, but going to these conferences, knowing the people that work all at the big consultancies and listening to them talk about what they're seeing and what we're doing it's so cool.
I think changing the game like that is big, man. Like, I think that how people think, like you said, people think of security as the door locks and the security cameras and things like that. And I think it to some extent it is, but I think breaking that stereotype, and what your company's doing to break that stereotype of what an all-encompassing, security team can do for you is big. And it does, it's hard to show that value, but it is valuable. And as a parent, and in a school district, I'm cognizant of that, and I'm like, that should be one of your last budget cuts, like in my personal opinion. But it is, unfortunately, and in churches are the same, is when things have to get cut at generally security, it's just like, first off, your liability increases significantly, but also that's the places that people feel the most safe, and you need to actually be safe, in my opinion. But,
well, what a great example. The idea that, in 2024, with the news cycles that we have, with all the stuff that we see, everybody comes and goes from the places that they come and go, and they expect that those places are doing everything they're supposed to.
Yeah. Yep.
This is why we see wrongful death lawsuits. This is why we see, all of those things happen after the fact, when they realize, they weren't doing all the stuff they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
I have a great buddy. Our attorney is the one that said it to me. He says, "Look, if you ever have a workplace violence incident, you're going to write a check. The only thing that's going to determine the size of that check is what your workplace violence prevention program looked like the day before the incident happened."
Yep.
And I love that, because it's absolutely true. And that part is quantifiable, if God forbid it ever happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, and being in realty, I always get
you
that
don't
wrong.
You don't say realty.
Realtor?
I don't know why. I don't even know how you came up with the term realty. Like, being in realty, that doesn't even make sense.
Aren't you in realty?
That doesn't even make grammatical sense.
You're a realtor,
Like,
but
in real estate.
you're in real estate.
Yes,
not
you're in real estate.
Right.
Like,
thank you for the clarity.
come on.
My good
It's all
friends
the
at
same.
the Oregon, my good friends at the Oregon Realtors Association are never going to invite me back to speak, because I've given personal safety and security talks to, the Association of Realtors.
I've seen them.
Yeah, because everybody deals with some version of this, right? But people that are buying houses, There are so many things that you can do from a low-hanging fruit, very inexpensive thing that makes your house safer than your neighbor, right?
Mhm.
I mean, it's a really, really interesting dynamic because we're talking about, oh, the companies out there and the big churches and stuff. But for everybody else listening to this, there's a place to navigate how you come and go from your home, how you take care of your family, how you protect your assets. That really is accessible to really everyone, and probably should be.
Yeah.
Do you travel around much, Bryan, or are you because you got a lot of employees now, and it sounds like you're kind of all over the place. But are you physically moving around a lot, or what's that look like on your kind of day to day, month to month schedule?
Yeah, that's so this year so far, travel's minimized a little bit. 2022, I had all the status everywhere because I was gone a lot. 23, it was a little less. But yeah, I travel a lot. I speak at a lot of different conferences. I speak at a lot of different in a lot of different places. I was fortunate enough to be asked to speak in London last year at a prevention symposium. Yeah, so I do travel a lot. I travel less now with the employees to visit clients and more to speak at all of the conferences and attend all of those things. Yeah. And I love to travel, so it's kind of nice. You know, I do like to be out and about.
Yeah, that's great. On that note a little bit, you know, probably with COVID, things changed. You got started right before COVID? Yeah, right? You've been started for
18,
a while.
COVID hit February 20, right? Yeah.
So how did your business, you know, first off, how did you approach that as it came up? You know, how did it approach as you came up? But also, did that change the dynamics of your business going forward once we came out of that pandemic?
So as most of the people that are watching this in the Northwest, for example, if you're watching this in the Portland area, you're very aware of what happened during the pandemic. We had a lot of global incidences besides a pandemic that occurred, some national incidences that involved law enforcement, that involved some really scary situations in different places around the country. Those things in our area equated to a lot of civil unrest. So for us, our business skyrocketed.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw a 700% increase in overall revenue between 20 and 21.
Wow.
It was gangbusters. And here's the thing. If people aren't at risk from a physical violence standpoint, right? We can do all kinds of open source intelligence stuff. Our intelligence team we can find almost everything. It's pretty incredible. Our intelligence team's amazing. But I can tell someone, look, you're fine. You're not at risk. Nobody's talking about you. Nobody's coming for you specifically. What I can't do is tell them how they feel about what's happening around them. And if they tell me, look, that's great, nobody's coming after me specifically, but what about all of this stuff that's happening? I want X, Y, and Z. Our job now is to not talk them out of that. Our job is to make sure it is done absolutely perfectly and to the highest standard for them. And that's true for every one of our clients. We don't, like you said, we don't have a one-size-fits-all security sticker that we put over a hole in the wall. We build everything specific to the client. Somebody needs an assessment of a residential home. Okay, we can do that. And it's not cheap, but it's also not super expensive, right? A government agency wants to figure out why they're having the issues they're having in downtown Portland. Great, we can do that. So it grows, it ebbs, and it flows. But everybody on some level needs to engage even low-level training around situational awareness. How do you come and go from a place?
Yeah.
And being, protecting of your kids, for example.
Yeah.
So pandemic was gangbusters.
That's good for you guys. That's great. You are Mr. Success, obviously. Your business has been successful. You started from scratch. With that in mind, what is your, and be positive here, Bryan, what is your number one advice for someone that is getting into not just maybe some advice for people that are coming out of law enforcement and want to do something similar, but also, just general business entrepreneurs. You've had to go through everything that a normal business owner goes through. You
Yep.
are a unique niche, but that did not change the fact that you had to start a business from scratch. So what's kind of the one piece of advice you'd give to someone that is either thinking about it or right in the midst of it and is struggling with something? What's the advice that could help them?
Yeah, the best advice I could give anyone, first, right out of the gate, right? We're not at hiring people yet. You're still just you. Figure out why you want to do what you want to do. Figure out how you're going to get there. And that's the mission. You got your vision statement, then you got your mission, and then your values should be your tactics. If we do this, then this thing should happen. And if we're lucky, we'll achieve this thing, right? So come up with that before you quit your job. Come up with that before you do anything, except by the name, right? By your name. But the best advice I can give you is find partners early. And by partners, I mean your key 3 vendors. You need an attorney, you need an accountant, you need an insurance person. Those 3 people should be the other 3 legs of the 4-legged bar stool. If they are not, and Joe, I think we've had this conversation, and I know I've had other people who are like, no, I mean, like I got QuickBooks. You have QuickBooks right until you don't.
Yeah.
You have payroll right until you don't. And what you don't need to do, and what an entrepreneur doesn't need to do, is stifle vision by getting caught in the minutia of figuring out how to invoice someone. You got to do a little bit of that early, but it's the value proposition and the dollars you're going to put into an attorney, an insurance person, and an accountant are negligible compared to how much money you're going to make when you're thinking about and acting out your vision.
For sure.
When I found that, it was a game changer. It was an absolute game changer for me. And you got to find the right ones. A lot of people out there see entrepreneurs and they think, oh, great. This guy's probably got a little capital, and 90% of businesses fail. So I'm just going to charge them a ton up front.
Yeah.
Right. And then if they grow, great. Find the people that want to be your partner. My lawyer took me out to lunch. Let me tell you what we can do for you. You don't need to give us a retainer. We're going to work when you need us to work. We want to grow with you. That's the game. That's the, and these are all Oregon companies. I love an Oregon company. I love local. I love being, even though I still do this a lot, right? I'm still on meetings.
Yeah.
I love being, all of my providers being local as often as we can. It's great.
That's great. Well, Bryan, we won't take too much of your time. If you want to give your pitch, I know you're in a unique kind of field, but you also work with, of a wide variety of different types of either companies, people, individuals, all sorts of stuff. So where do they go if they're wanting to look or they're interested in kind of finding out what your business can provide them?
Thanks, man. Yeah. So I'm all over socials. Like LinkedIn's the best probably for me. It's Bryan, BRY, right? Flannery. My name's probably going to be on something. I think it's on my screen, actually. See that? Trained Observer. And then our website is Foresight, like it's spelled there, -sc.com for Foresight Security Consulting. But yeah, and then, they can reach out that way. And look, and we're happy to answer questions and engage where we can. But we really do believe in the overall goal of just making everybody in this world safer. And if we get to, I get to do this with good people and the best in the world at what we do, then, by the grace of God, go I. So
that's awesome, man. Well, thank you for being on. I hope we can have you on in the future and kind of just chat about your war stories and things like that. But I think it's going to be really helpful for people.
Well, Cody said before this, he wanted to hear all the stories. So we're going to have a whole separate episode.
Yeah, I want
love it.
Episode 2 where we get into more of the, we got a good highlight of the business here. Now we go into the previous life.
I know it'd be fun. But
well, Joe and Cody, both of you, thanks for doing this. What a pleasure to have some local boys made good. And, but like there's a, what's cool about our town specifically, and what's cool about the Northwest is that the passion, everybody in their individual lives have about whatever, right? Like, Joe, our kids go to the same school. We've known each other for years. We're in, baseball and all that stuff. But the community's so awesome and our community's so tight. And so it's really cool to watch you guys do this. Honor for me to be on here, and I can't wait to see who else you bring in to talk about what they're doing in our communities and how they're growing business. And it's pretty remarkable. So good on you guys for doing this.
Thank you, man. It's been
Thank you.
exciting.
Yeah.
We're excited about it, and we're happy that you were on and thankful that you were on to take the time out of your day to do this. So thank you.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thanks very
Okay.
much.
Well, until next time, we'll talk to you guys later.